These are the best books that I've read in 2025. Be aware that I've read a ton of them, so I'm not gonna list them all. However, I'm gonna mention a few and add a few comments. I have read several books on narcissism because I was preparing an article for Deep Power Moves. An article on what narcissism is, how to use it. Later on, it will be turned into a lesson for Power University, which will go even deeper and with more insights. I read the top 3 handbooks. All of them were incredibly helpful. Probably the best one is this one. However, it's not like the other 2 were not as good. As a matter of fact, I'm glad I read all 3 of them because they all highlighted different aspects and I could take something from them all. Then I read The New Science of Narcissism, which is from Campbell. Campbell is one of the top researchers, if not the biggest researcher on narcissism. And this is a great book for more, let's say, people who are not into the nitty-gritty of the science and the empirical evidence, because it is still scientifically thorough. However, it's more approachable, more entertaining to read, and it probably can give you a better overview of how narcissism can look like in real life. Plus, it's one of those American types of books where it mixes science with self-help. But I'm not saying this in a critical way. Indeed, it is helpful because of that. Then I have read It's Not You, which is a book for victims of narcissism. Now, the author of the book, she's actually very good. However, it's not much aligned for Deep Power Moves because it is more for victims of narcissists. So it has this kind of frame where, narcissism is bad, narcissists are bad, you, poor you, are the victim. We're not that type of channel at Deep Power Moves. We are a channel for winners, for men who want to use any tool they can. Sure, use it in a honorable way. However, first we must learn what works. And narcissism works. Narcissists date the most attractive women, they become leader, and they advance in life. They gain more status. They also have higher self-confidence, at least the grandiose narcissist rather than the vulnerable. But since we focus on winners, then of course we focus more on grandiose narcissism. Still, the book is good. It is really good. I still disagree a little bit with the title. It's not you. To me, it's also disempowering. Why it's not you? You want to be part of the problem because then you can be part of the solution. Also, it annoys me because it's not true. You don't know the reader. The reader may also be a narcissist. There is indeed a certain tendency for homophily among narcissism and dark triads, such as you tend to end up with the people who are also narcissists. I'm not victim blaming. There are plenty of partners of narcissists who are not narcissists at all. However, to have a book for everybody and to say it's not you, and in the whole book there isn't a single mention that a narcissist partner could also have narcissistic tendencies, this is self-gaslighting. And it's also low power to me. Who cares if it's not you? Now it's you, now you're in the relationship, do something about it. So I've been very critical, but the book is good, it's really good. She's a good author, she knows what she's talking about, and indeed she's also a PhD. So I read a few more also about clinical psychologists about narcissism, and in general, there is an issue when clinical psychologists write about narcissism or about any other dark triad or about any personality psychology in general. And it's they tend to see only the failed ones in that profile. For example, when it comes to narcissism, clinical psychologists tend to see the low-power, failed and vulnerable narcissist. They don't get to see the Donald Trump and the grandiose narcissists who have high confidence, high self-esteem, and who believe that their narcissism gives them an advantage in life. So yes, they have a lot of experience, but this experience is extremely biased. So in general, watch out when you read popular books about clinical psychologists because they only get a tiny slice. In my opinion, some of them are also not very experienced with the research, and you need, how can I say it in a respectful way, so I'm not even going to try, you need to have high IQ to also try to understand the limitation of your own bias and your own biased sample. If you don't have that, then you're going to consider your biased sample, the general population, and the general rules and frameworks that you extrapolate are going to be ineffective to both build a theory and to help people. Plus, I read a lot of books on evolutionary psychology. One of them also became the top evolutionary psychology book that I recommend, and it's because it's more foundational. So it's written for university students, starting though from zero and building up, explaining what evolutionary psychology is and the general principles that govern the discipline. Very good, recommended. I also read a couple of cultural evolutionary books. Both of them are from Joseph Heinrich, and they were fantastic. They changed my perspective and the way I look at evolution. So before, I used to think that evolution was the foundation, the substrata, let's say, of human nature. And then on top, you had culture. I still think that way. However, Heinrich reshaped my way of thinking because now I make the top higher level of culture much thicker, and I think of it as more as co-communicating mechanism. There is a feedback that runs between of them. So less separated and more porous system. And also I believe now the cultural evolution, the culture sometimes can override evolution. That book was so good that now when I go back to typical evolutionary psychologists, I consider them to heavily underestimate the effect of culture. Also in a similar vein, I read the Oxford Handbook of Infidelity, which is fantastic, really, really good. Then there was the Routledge Handbook of Soft Power. I had to note that political science and in general international relations to me felt like a soft science. It was a lot of theory, a lot of these old past thinkers say that, this modern thinker says this, but it was lighter on evidence. This is not a criticism on the authors, by the way. The authors did a great job. It's just that the science itself is more theoretical and less grounded on empiricism. I also read a few handbooks on gender psychology, and the difference between men and women. It was the foundation for our articles on masculinity and how to be more masculine. Then I read Social Dominance Theory. Fantastic, fantastic work. Both for understanding social dynamics at a social level and for understanding personality psychology. People differ in the way that they are socially dominant oriented, and it's also very much connected to power dynamics and personal power. So it helped me improve several of our articles and of course Power University. This is why I read these books, by the way. One, because I'm interested, of course, but two, also for the job I do, to be more empirically grounded, to be more thorough with our articles and even more with Power University. Then I read Persuasion, Social Influence and Compliance Gaining. Fantastic book once again, and it also made it to the list of the best books on persuasion. The APA Handbook on Nonverbal Communication, it was good, really good. However, in general, I have to say that body language as a science is not very empirically grounded. There are several research, of course, but I found them to be more about voice tonality rather than body poses. So when you read a lot of people talking about body poses, be aware that it's less empirical and more about personal theories. It's not to say that it's not valid. I'm pretty sure that a guy who stands a certain way communicates higher power, higher confidence, and higher dominance than a guy who closes up and looks down. However, what I'm saying is that the science is not there yet to confirm it, or not as much as I had hoped, or at least not as much in this handbook. However, there are not that many handbooks on nonverbal communication, and I couldn't find any on body language specifically, so probably the science just isn't there. Frame analysis, I picked it up because Goffman was one of the first authors to introduce the concept of frame analysis. I was hoping for more insights on frame analysis, frame control. However, I must say it wasn't as insightful as I hoped. It has little to do with actual frame control. There was little practical knowledge, so yeah, I mean, I'm glad I read it, but well, I know that was just me being nice. I didn't like it. And then there are these two books. Very interesting how the authors write. Now, there are two types of authors. One of them, you read their books and think, I'm learning and getting smarter. And then there is the second type of author, and you think, I'm learning that the author is smarter. The way they write, they use several tactics that on the Power Moves we will call teacher frames. Here are some tactics. Blah, 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 blah. And you know why that is? So their rhetorical question, threat expands your ignorance, and threat expands the fact that they are the teacher teaching you. Another tactic they use, blah, 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 blah. They say something that sounds strange, and then they ask, does that sound strange? Well, let me explain. Or if it's a more practical book, this is another tactic I've seen sometimes. Blah, 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 blah. So now, are you ready to go out and do it? Hold on, we still need to learn. This one thread expands that you're a learner and that you're still needy of their teaching. In this book here, the author even used this obvious tactic. Blah, 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 blah. Is this surprising? If it is, it's because you haven't paid attention to when I said blah, 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 blah. You cannot get any more teacher frame than that. Basically, he's reprimanding you that you haven't paid enough attention, and this sends you back to his initial lesson. This is a criticism of the writing style, but it's not necessarily a criticism of the content. As a matter of fact, these two books had very good content, they were very insightful. Taraban especially makes a very good job of putting together several available theories and insights and merging them into a larger and coherent narrative. In my opinion, he could have gained even more with more short-term experience and insights. So what the book was lacking was that short-term knowledge and insight, the type of dating that is less based on material exchange and more based on raw attraction. You could see that in several different parts, but otherwise it was a very good work. Well, it's still December now, so I haven't finished reading all the books for 2025. I'm now reading Handbooks on Psychopathy, so I am preparing for the upcoming article on psychopathy and how to be a good psychopath. After that, at TPM, we will release an article on the dark triads in general, all put together, and then we will have a lesson on Power University putting together also all the best from the different dark triads and how you can use those insights to become a more effective, empowered man. As usual, we will make the lesson on Power University faster with the equal amount of insights that what's available public, and then I will add some extra insights for the alumni. This is also a philosophy of mine, by the way. Some people say, take everything you have and give it away freely. I don't believe much in that for a few reasons. However, I don't want to go too off topics. Plus, in 2025, I will start adding video lessons to Power University. I can't wait. So in those videos, I will also release more personal experience that I won't otherwise share publicly. Anyway, this is for the books I've been reading in 2025. Thank you for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao.